the agenda?
Mhm.
There are 5 items on the agenda. Anybody not have the agenda? All righty. So we'll review the financial statements. Now, I'm not getting any sound. Are people speaking?
I'm speaking.
Oh, there you go. Now I have the sound. Okay. So,
We have a lot of documents today.
yes. When I reviewed the financial statements, I didn't see any unusual activity. I didn't need to call Joy and ask. So as you look over them, our budgeted revenue is 46,366 against an expected month's income of 61,533. And the is the transportation CD, Capital District Transportation, is that a loss of income, Paul? Is that the difference?
Well, we only receive actual income of about 2% of total collections. So in that sense, you know, we might see a little bit less, but it's not going to really amount to much.
Okay.
Now you can see on the report that we are reporting the 27,000 in income, but there's also an expense item carried over for the CDTA. Some of our records here, you got to remember, go back to the first quarter. So that's where some of that is coming from.
Okay. So for our expenses, any comments on the expenses?
I'd like to make another comment on the income.
Yeah, surely.
It shows under Friends of TPL 0 so far. Actually, and this is not included because it was after the closeout of April 30th on this book, but I just wanted to point out, we did receive almost 7,200 from the Friends for the lighting project in the stacks.
Okay.
Which has already been
You know, it looks
expensed.
like 0, but I didn't want it to, you know.
Okay.
Have the expenses already been expensed on that, Paul?
What's that?
Have the expenses related to the lighting project been expensed on the financial statements?
I don't think so because, oh no, that won't be expensed because we had the Friends pay the lighting project directly.
Okay.
So it will not come out of our, you won't see it in our expense account.
So we're getting $7,200 above what they paid for the lights?
You'll see the 70, actually, I'm sorry, you won't see that as an income item either. I just wanted to say, you know, it looks like the Friends haven't contributed anything, and then they did.
Gotcha. I understand that.
But it won't appear actually as an income item either, because they did pay for it directly. So it really won't show up in our books.
Now, didn't we pay something for that as well? Or no, we didn't pay anything?
No, Friends covered the whole cost of that.
Okay.
If we
Hard to
move
be
to the,
confusing here.
yeah, and moving to the expenses, Paul, on the salary, we're at 89,795 against the budgeted 65. What accounts for the variance?
This includes a 3-pay month, 3-pay period month, which is a little unusual.
Okay,
There's two of those throughout the year. This will even out a bit as we go along, but when you have a 3 pay period month, that's what it looks like.
okay. Anybody else have any questions about the expenses as you review them?
I was a little disappointed to see that there wasn't the savings that existed last month. I think the last month we were about 10% under the budgeted
Right.
amount, and now seem to be right up where we would be spending normally.
Actually, we're about 10% under. It's the three salary periods that are driving that. It's about a $25,000 swing.
So we would expect that then to be leveled out
Well, yeah,
going forward.
yeah, it will balance out towards the end of the year. I mean, you can either budget for, if you know that there's a three salary pay period in a particular month, the budget would reflect that, whereas it doesn't here. The budget has the pay periods evenly spread across the entire year. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I think the anomaly that we first talked about, the 3 pay periods, is also contributing to that significantly. That's 24,000. Which next year, if we think of it, we could try to lay out the pay periods and try to spread it a little differently, but it isn't the loss for this income is offset by that somewhat.
Yeah.
So
Actually, if you look,
if you subtract the 24,000, we're pretty much on budget in the net income.
yeah.
Right. I'd rather not see us on budget. I would rather see us below budget.
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
We would actually be our expenses are actual are 120 and our budget is 113. If you were to add the 25 back in, we'd be reduce the 25 out, we would be at 95 versus 113 for the month. So we'd be significantly.
Exactly correct.
Yeah, the one thing it does throw that off a little bit, I was just noticing it since we were talking about it, is the hotspots actually cost more than what was in that equipment purchase area. We're quite a bit over budget there, so that would bring it, a little bit down, but we're still way, way, way under budget if you adjust for the multiple pay periods.
Right.
Well, but if I look at year to date and I subtract 20,000 from the 471, that puts us about on target, where I think last month we were actually under about 10% under. So
Okay, later on in the agenda, not as a bullet point, but we did want to start talking about steps we'll take on next year's budget beginning now. But are there any more questions on the financial statements?
okay, when you say financial statements, just this one or
Sure.
on the others as well?
Just the one we reviewed, the monthly.
Okay. No.
Okay, so then we can move to review the expenses now. I'm jumping from one to another. I need to pull it up electronically. I didn't print it out. So our total expenses, are there any questions on the expenses?
I have a question. I was noticing that we're paying a bill to TAP for $3,300. Is that for the specs for the RFP?
You mean the bid documents for the masonry work?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's how much it costs to get specs?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments, Paul, on the expenses?
I don't see anything else, Bob, that's unusual.
All right, so the total is 38,519.43, and I'll be recommending to the board approval of those. Let's see.
Do you want a second on that, Bob?
Pardon me?
Do you want a committee second on that? And then a vote?
Well, surely that'd be fine. The last time I did it and asked for approval by vote, we said that, well, it's the trustees that will approve it and that we would ask for a second there. But let me do it this way. Is there any disagreement with recommending the approval of the expenses at 38,519? And if I had done it one way and then we switched back and forth, but the way I understood our protocols is that I would recommend at the regular trustee meeting for that approval, and then they would do a second and move on.
Well, I believe the ongoing protocol that the board's been using for quite some time has been in committee. A motion is made to get approval from the board of the expenses. It's then that is seconded. The committee approves that motion. And then when we have a full board meeting, the treasurer then says the motion from committee is to ask for approval of paying the bills. And it's then seconded by a non-finance committee member and then approved by the entirety of the board.
Okay, I'm very happy to follow that protocol, Evelyn. So do we have a motion to accept the expenses?
Well, you made the motion. How about I second it? You made the motion already.
Okay.
I'll second it. And then you just have to ask for approval of the committee.
All right, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All right, maybe have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And Paul, I didn't see the auditor's agreement that you and I had signed. Is that distributed in the board packet?
The RFP?
No. You
Auditor
and I
agreement.
signed an agreement with our auditor to do the 2019.
I don't know, Joy, was that in this month's?
No, I
You
don't
and I met
have,
on it. We changed the phrasing. He then redid his proposal to us and we signed it. I
Right,
wanted to bring
Right,
that
I
forward and
don't-
have it on the agenda.
I don't have a copy of that. They didn't send it to me.
The original RFP from 2016 is in the board packet.
No, that's a different item.
You're talking about the signed,
Okay, wait, what I wanted to do is report that Paul and I have signed an agreement with the present auditor to perform the audit for 2019. And we'll forward it to you, but just for your information, we received this proposal, we did some edits, and he agreed to some changes, and we signed it, and it's now done. But I would like to report that to the trustees.
Sure,
they're,
I can get a copy from them. They're really good at giving
No,
electronic
I
copies.
have the copy, Joy.
Well, we signed it, Joy, so we should have a copy. Paul and I both signed it.
We'll put it on the Dropbox.
right,
Yeah.
there's a folder, an audit folder that it can be placed in.
Sure.
Sure, okay. Anyway, so it was a routine. There were some minor changes to the agreement, but we have it in force. And now I'd like to move then and talk about the future proposals.
Could I just say one thing in reference to the agreement being signed? People are getting requests for information from the auditors for the upcoming audit, the 2019 audit. So it's good to hear that the agreement's signed. I wasn't aware of it, and people can go ahead and respond.
Right, yeah, that's why I had it on the agenda. I wanted it to be presented, but we'll post it. It's substantially the same. Now we could move on to the next agenda item, review a request for proposal to the auditors. We had some, Paul and I had some discussion about the timing of doing a request for proposals. And we did agree to do it relatively quickly when we have our agreement to go forward. And so we worked hard on, we took the original RFP and we had 2 meetings and some further edits, and it was distributed in the board packet. So what we'd like to do is move forward on that. And we will not be sending them out until we identify to whom they're being sent. And that will determine the dates. So Paul, have you any estimate on how long it will take you to gather the 5 to 7 that we might be sending them to?
Well, I don't think it'll take very long. It's just that we probably want to wait until we're back in the building and people are more or less beginning to open again. I don't know what situation these auditors are in, whether they're all working from home, whether they all have the tools that they need to respond. So I would like to basically send out the RFP when things are at least beginning to open.
Okay, but my question to you was, how quickly will you think you'll identify to whom we will be sending out the
Well,
request for
just a
proposal?
couple of weeks.
Okay, well, it might even be open by then, so, all right. Well, the RFP is in your packet, in the board packet. And we cut it down some from the original proposal. I don't know if there are any questions on it.
I have a question.
Yes.
It says that we could stay with the auditor that's chosen for 5 years. Previously, we had in our bylaws, I think it was our bylaws or policy or something, should be three years. And we changed it because we wanted to continue with the auditor that we currently have to be 5. But I just wondered whether we wanted to revert to the 3 years versus the 5 years that's in this document.
I'm not sure. I'll give you my answer and Paul can give you his. This request for proposal is for an annual audit.
Mhm.
And as we did with our current auditor that I thought was going to be presented today, we re-signed each year. The policy is for 5 years, but we're not going to have a 5-year contract. We'll do it year by year, which will allow us to change auditors sooner. So this is not a request for a 5-year contract. It's a request to do the 2020 audit. And then we'll see how we're working together and whether we go forward with that year by year, as we did this year with our current auditor. That would be my answer, but, you know, new guy on the block. Do you have a different answer, Paul?
No, I think that's the idea. We do go year to year. I think the 5 years gives us a little more flexibility if we really, you know, do well with the auditors that we choose and we're happy with them. It also gives, you know, them a little more time to get to know us as well. So I think the 5 years, you know, is fine. But again, this is just an annual year-to-year selection that we make.
Exactly. So we could change auditors in 2020, 2021 if we choose to. So the 5, Marie, is consistent with the policy.
With the current policy, yes.
And
Yeah.
since it's not binding on anybody or an expectation, you know, would you still like to see it go to 3?
No, I was more asking the question. I think it serves a purpose, and that purpose is how often you think that there should be a change of auditor in order to have a fresh look or by people who might catch something different than
Right.
had. And so I don't have any strong feelings. I just wanted to raise the question.
If I may,
Okay.
it's the
All right.
financial policy that actually says that we review or look for a new auditor after a 3-year period. Again, it was to make sure that there was no, I'll use the word funny business, you know, to make sure a fresh eye, to make sure there is no collusion of any kind. However, when we had that little issue with the city at one point and an erroneous payment, we stuck with an auditor for an extra year. We happened to also like the auditor we had because, again, we were just getting into that a smoother process with this auditor. So I think we made a motion to extend it to the 5 years. I guess it was 5 years. However, I don't think we actually changed the finance policy.
Yes, we did.
We did. It's actually
Yes,
in the
it's now
policy.
says
Okay.
5 years.
But it isn't a contract for 5 years. It is we get to review this and how many years it is that we go before we start really needing to review it.
I hear you, Evelyn, but we are not going to have a 5-year contract or a 3-year contract. We go
Right,
year
I
by
understand
year.
that. Yeah, I understand. I did see the RFP, so I know it's like a yearly thing. But you're talking about what the policy is versus what we're doing, and
Right. Yeah, I was not, I think I knew there was the policy said 5 years, but I think I was told it was changed from 3, but
that is correct.
the reason we're doing this RFP is because we've been with the present auditor for 5 years and we'll stick to our policy.
So is that settled?
Excuse me, Marie?
So has that been settled then?
Yes, I didn't think it was a problem. I don't,
Okay. I just had something else if that's.
yes.
So I did find some typographical errors that I would be happy to share outside of this meeting.
Okay, surely. Yeah, we'd be
So
happy.
maybe I can talk with you about them, Bob.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I found a bunch. So any help is welcome.
Okay. Well, so we'll continue to work on this. And very likely you would see it before we'll finalize it and you'll see it again before we act on it.
Okay.
All right. I was going to just mention one thing in there, but we can continue. there's one issue I just wanted you thinking on. In, let me see, section B, the pages are not numbered, so maybe we can, in the future, just do numerical so they're easy to find. In section B, toward the back, technical proposal, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4. The last paragraph in number 4, and we've outlined it in yellow, reads, consultants and firm specialists mentioned in response to the RFP can only be changed with the express prior written permission of the library, which retains the right to approve or reject replacements. Paul and I had a difference of opinion here, so I would appreciate other people's opinion. My opinion is that I thought it was an overreach for a customer to require approval for changes that might occur in their organization. And I suggest that we not ask for approval, but ask that we be informed. Paul would like to leave it as it is and open.
Yeah, if I could state, my position is that if we're signing an agreement with the auditors and the consultants are mentioned in that agreement, then if they want to change the agreement, we need to be on board with those changes.
Yes, I understand your point. I just don't agree with it.
So it's really a legal position. We need to, once an agreement is signed, they need to carry it out as written.
Yeah, I think we're asking them to commit to not take personnel actions without our permission. And I think, suppose somebody has done something horrible. They'd like to discharge them. They don't need our permission to run their organization.
I don't, is that actually what that's saying? Or is it that they need to, you know, when they do make a change, let's say they have terminated someone and they put someone else in that position, that we need to have written approval of that person?
That's, well, that's a different issue than they can't take action without our written permission. So that's another thing that we could add,
Oh,
but it's a different twist on what we're talking about. This phrase that
right. I
can
see.
only be changed with the express prior written permission of the library is not something I'm comfortable with.
Well, what if there was getting Paul's, how do I want to say this? Paul's philosophy, but changing the words a little bit so that you will be comfortable with their retention of the ability to hire and fire and change staff, and we have the opportunity or the need to have written approval of a replacement.
Yes,
Yeah,
we could change the wording, that would be fine. We could say
What about that?
consultation, information.
Mm-hmm.
I think that,
Makes sense to both of you?
yeah, to me, the real issue here is what is the, if we hire a firm and they have somebody's name in a proposal, which we've approved, and that person, say, embezzles from another customer of the firm, and they decide to fire that employee, what is the resolution we want? Is really, I mean, you know, this issue should address that resolution we would want as the library. Do we want to terminate the contract and find another auditor? Do we want to, I think that's where, you know, where Bob is getting to is that we shouldn't be telling them how to run their business, because if they don't do a good job by us, we're going to find another auditor next year. That is our remedy that we have our within this policy. The question is, you know, should they be making personnel decisions on their end only with the approval of a customer? If they did that with the approval of every customer of an auditing firm, they wouldn't be able to operate.
Yep.
So, I mean, to me, the remedy we have here is, you know, we can cancel a contract. We can not rehire them the following year and find a different auditor if they in any way displease us. This doesn't really give us anything, you know, other than that, other than the ability, you know, we could say, you know, if you choose to replace somebody with somebody we don't like, we have the right to cancel the contract, because that's really what it would come down to. We can't tell them who to hire and who not to hire. We don't have that power.
I may
So-
have to consult the attorneys on this. I don't,
Yeah, I mean, it's an
I don't know how to
interesting,
word that.
yeah, it's an interesting thing because we
Yeah.
don't, you know,
Well, Paul,
You know-
I think it's something that you're firm about, and going to the attorneys to get it's just driving up expenses, which we're going to be talking about soon. What are we going to do about the long-term budgets? You know, I just agree with what Mark said. You can't restrict somebody from personnel actions that they may need to take until they get your permission if you're a customer. It's just not a business practice. Asking for documentation, information, etc. is fine, but saying they can't take a personnel action until we approve it in writing, I think that's excessive. It's not a business practice.
Yeah, I think the intention of the clause is that we want to be able to protect the library. The reality is that we can't really control their employment practices. And the optics of this, actually, on the other side of it, looks like if we don't have the person, that we might have some other reason why we want a person in place. And I don't particularly like those optics of that either, you know.
I guess, you know, the only idea here is when I originally wrote all this was, you know, once you make an agreement and you sign an agreement with a company like the auditors, and you kind of want them to stick to that agreement, whatever's in there. If they want to make changes to it, we need to be on board with those changes.
But Paul,
So there
suppose
should be a
one
way
of
to
the
say-
operatives that we've approved has a character problem and is disrupting their organization with some kind of inappropriate behavior. They may reach an appointment to an agreement with that person where they mutually agree to not discuss the cause, and the person leaves. And they don't need our permission to run their organization. We'd want to be consulted about the replacement,
No, but
something
I mean-
like that. But
I'm not saying that, I'm
other
not
than
saying
that, I'm
that
not
that's what we want. What I'm saying is that we've made an agreement. If that person needs to leave the firm, then is that agreement still binding? Can the library simply say, look, you know,
if this
person-
clause remains, then it would not be binding. That's why I'd like to take it out.
And therefore, we want to suspend this contract, so we don't want you to continue with our auditor. We'll get another auditor for this year.
Did I misunderstand that Mark was saying that you could remove the part about it being express prior written permission and still retain the right to discontinue the contract based on not being happy with the replacement? Did I misunderstand that, Mark?
I didn't say that, but I mean, to me, the solution to this would be a clause somewhere that covers the entire contract that says if there's any material changes in the way that the selected auditor is going to perform it, that we have the right of first refusal, however a lawyer would put that, as to either continue the contract or not. We don't want a company to come in and give us, you know, the greatest auditor on the planet, and then, you know, the third day of the audit, the intern shows up to do the job. We don't want to be put in that position. We want somebody to be representative, and that would be a material change to have them come back and say somebody had to leave the company. Either they decided to leave or we forced them to leave the company, and this is the replacement, and they're of equal response, you know, equal credibility, or, you know, the resume is equal or better, we don't want to have to approve that in advance of them getting rid of, or the person leaving, having left. So,
Let me make a suggestion in the interest of time. What I would like to do, if Mark and Paul, if you could work on this two-sentence, one-sentence paragraph, and see if you could mutually come to an a proposed change to reflect that. Either exactly what you said, add an additional clause about material transfers, etc.,
Yep.
or change this wording, and let's try to resolve it, on email circulation offline, and see if we can come to an agreement as to what might be more attractive. And we will bring this back next time if that's done. There's no time push on this, other than it would be nice to have it taken care of. Would you agree to that, Paul and Mark?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
yeah, I would do. Yeah, I think there's enough discussion going on that I think it's not something we would do in a finance committee meeting. It's something that we would do offline and then bring it back to the finance committee.
Yes, that's very good. I appreciate that. All right. Is there any other comments on this before we close the item? Okay, thank you. The last thing is the date and time of the next meeting. One of the tasks that we need to do is review our expectations of annual budgets regularly. Usually it's in a more normal functioning year, but Marie and I had a discussion, and she proposed that we meet prior to the next month's meeting and begin to review where we are budget-wise in terms of what expectations we can anticipate from the city, what actions we might want to begin to take if there is identified actions to be taken. But the environment is unstable and unknown. And so the function of preparing our next year's budget will be very important. So we were thinking about a meeting late next week or the following week to begin that review of our annual budget. We'll probably poll you. I think it's important, Mark, that you be available, and Evelyn or anybody on the call to begin that process. And we will be scheduling a meeting for that purpose to begin to look at our 2020 budget.
That sounds great.
All righty. Okay, I'd like a motion to close the meeting. I'd make a motion to close the meeting. Anyone opposed closing the meeting? Moving on. Thank you very much.
Okay.
End the meeting.
Aye.
It's, we're past the start time, right?
Yes, we have.
So, any public comment? I see at least one non-board member. No, lots more. Does anybody in the audience have a comment? Would they be able to speak if they chose to? Joy?
Yes, they would. They can just unmute themselves at any time and they can speak if they would like.
Okay, so I gather that they're not choosing to do that, so moving on. The next thing on the agenda is the treasurer's report and approval of expenditures.
All right, we had our finance meeting immediately prior, and we reviewed the expenses, and Finance Committee recommends to the trustees that we approve our monthly expenses for April in the amount of $38,519.43. And we'd like to ask you I'd like to make a motion or have someone else make a motion to approve those expenditures and so we can pay them.
Is there a second to Bob's motion? I'm sorry, was that a motion or a second? I didn't,
Evelyn had mentioned before that we need a second from a non-finance committee board member.
I second.
Thank you.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone not in favor? So I didn't do a slow roll, but everybody's here except for Arlene, and everybody voted in favor. No abstentions, right? Okay. Next is the consent agenda. Anybody want to advocate for removal of any item from the consent agenda?
Do you want for the record to go through what's actually in today's consent agenda? In the Dropbox?
Well, as far as I saw before I came on, it was the minutes from the April meeting, and it was the UHLS report. Nicely done, by the way, Evelyn. Always write a nice report.
It was a little, I apologize to everyone, it was a little late, but all the material came yesterday late. But if anyone, whoever has a chance, or actually please read the pieces, because it goes thoroughly through Upper Hudson's perspective on the reopening, and we'll talk about the construction grant and the budget implications and you name it. So it was a rather dense report for a change.
So
And thank you, Marie.
I always find your reports very informative.
Thank you.
So hearing no recommendations to remove, is there a motion that we approve the consent agenda?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second. Oh, you got a couple.
Okay, I guess Mark and then Kirsten. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? All 6 board members, including myself, have voted in favor. Next is the reopening plan and issues. Paul?
Yes, that's on the Dropbox. I just want to say that we've been talking about reopening plans ever since we closed. What I have right now is really an outline of the direction that I think we need to take. And that direction involves a phased reopening and a phased return to library services. Not everything is here yet in this plan. It isn't a formal written in stone kind of plan that I don't think we need to formally approve at this point. There will be additions going along. And particularly in the area of phase 3. But overall, the plan involves phase 1, where the staff comes back into the building and catches up on some work that we need to do. The phase 2, we do envision offering a curbside service. Now, not every aspect of that service is yet in this plan. One thing that's missing so far is, we have a drive-up curbside service that's mentioned, but we will need to work out some sort of walk-up curbside service as well in order for that to be successful. And in phase 3, where actually people are come back into the building again, it's on a somewhat restricted basis. You know, we're going to have to limit that, I believe, to coming in, getting materials and leaving. So, you know, phase 3, even though it allows people into the building, I don't envision it as really library service as we know it. And then, you know, there's quite a bit we need to add to that. At that phase, I think we need the staff divided into at least 2 teams that do not work at the same time in the library. This would allow us, in case somebody does become infected, I believe it'll allow us to continue operation while that team is in quarantine. As well, it does involve very limited hours, and those hours are limited because we need to divide the staff into those teams. It's not that easy to schedule that sort of thing. So I'm envisioning hours that are somewhere in the neighborhood of between 11 and 6 on a daily basis, and then 4 hours on Saturday, which would give us almost, well, close to 40 hours a week. I think that's something that we can manage, and it's not yet worked out completely in this plan. Again, one thing that's missing here, there's vague references to how long each phase is going to take. We don't know how long each phase is going to take at this point. You know, we don't know whether we're talking weeks. We don't know whether we're talking months on some of these phases. Part of this plan is going to have to be left flexible. You know, it has been said that we need to be able to actually reverse our forward motion to go from one phase back to a previous phase, in case there's, you know, need to do that. But anyway, what we have here is basically an outline of, I think, how we need to move forward.
Any questions or comments?
I just wanted to, Paul, this was nice to get, and it seems to me very thoughtful. I just had one question on phase 2. The third bullet from the bottom says no ILL. What is ILL?
Oh, interlibrary loan.
Thank you.
Out of system.
Very nice job.
There's just one other thing to think about as we do this. It's what you certainly created talks about how to flesh out that whole reopening for internal use, certainly. But a lot of what's going to happen too is going to be very dependent on other libraries opening, for materials, for the inner, I still like to call it interlibrary loan, I know that's, but all the materials that's crossing through and the delivery system starting up again. And I know they're still on hold.
Yeah.
The delivery people are ready, but they need to get the heads up. And again, it's going to be a very slow process. Upper Hudson is going to be the one holding a quarantining material for 72 hours at Essex before it goes out again. And that's just one of the little gears of this whole process. So in many ways, what we do is also dependent on what all the other libraries do.
Yeah, I think that's been part of the discussion. We have been meeting every week in the director's meeting. And that's certainly something that's been discussed. You know, there is a problem of, you know, one larger library opening and nobody else opening, and everybody wants to use that library. I don't think, you know, we're anywhere near that kind of a problem. I think we have a lot of cooperation in our system. I think almost everybody is thinking about in the same direction. So I really see us reopening, all of us with phases, and all of us pretty much at the same time.
How does this coincide with the governor's phases, the 4 phases that he's proposed?
Well, this is this is still a big problem. Libraries have not been mentioned in the governor's plan for reopening. NYLA is, and to a certain extent, DLD and the Education Department has been trying to pinpoint where libraries really fit. Phase 4, which is way down the road, talks about schools and entertainment. These places have large gatherings that are different from a standard library operation. Standard library operation is much closer to retail than to some of the entertainment type operations out there. So what they're trying to do is pinpoint where libraries fit, and NYLA is recommending that we fit in phase 2, which is pretty much in the retail reopening phase.
There is evidence from the governor's office that they may play along with that, just because he made a comment a couple days ago about museums and galleries as fitting into the phase 2, and they were originally in the phase 4 with entertainment. So
Right.
there's reason to be encouraged that may happen. I have one question. I read through this. This was a great document. I just wanted to say thank you very much. And this is also related to the governor thing and my own personal experiences is sneeze guards. In the governor's meeting today, they were talking about infection rates in healthcare workers and frontline workers as compared to the general public, and then the infection rates are much lower in healthcare workers. And one of the things that they had mentioned was face, what are they called? Face shields.
Yeah.
And instead of installing, it's a thought, instead of installing sneeze guards, which are place-based, if we wanted to better protect our employees, just face shields is something that I thought would be kind of interesting to look into. And I do know that the Center for Gravity is in manufacturing them for healthcare workers, and they're right down the street. And so it's just something that I thought I'd mention.
Yeah, I guess I have thought about that as well, even though I currently have the materials getting ready to make the sneeze guards. And plexiglass has been ordered. I do have the other materials, and I had planned on building 7 sneeze guards in my spare time. I think they may still be needed. I have thought about the face shields, and I hadn't made any other decisions on that.
Just something to think about.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think the document looks great. I think it's a great start.
You also mentioned personal protective equipment in phase 1, but do you have a thought on how that phases through the project or through the rollout, or is that only during phase 1 and then it's dropped after phase 1?
I'm sorry, which now? What?
Gloves and masks or face shields.
Yeah, I think the PPE goes forward pretty far. And that's something else that, I need to add. And one thing I need to add there too, as I said, following CDC recommendations, but we need to add as well state and local health officials' recommendations. And I think those are going to include, personal protective equipment for a long time.
Anybody else? Evelyn, did I hear you start to say something at some point?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. When you mentioned the center for gravity, it was the amusing part is, in fact, Mark, the seat you replaced in a sense is the current director of the Center for Gravity. She was the board member who resigned from our board.
Oh, we know somebody there.
Yeah, so we might have an in.
Cool.
Now, Paul, you mentioned that the libraries you thought would be coordinated with one another. What if one library has a problem and needs to pull back? What will happen with the other libraries? Will they all do the same, or will, even though they would?
That's kind of a good question. The problem can be, and most libraries, I think, at least larger libraries, are talking about using teams of employees on a every other week kind of basis. And so the problem can arise, okay, what if one of the teams is infected, or one person in the team is infected, and you have to quarantine the whole team? Right now, it looks like libraries are saying, okay, we can still go forward with the other team, until the end of that quarantine period. Will that actually work? We're hopeful that it does, but we're not even 100% sure. Let's say if one team needs to be quarantined, does the health department say, okay, no, the whole library needs to be quarantined? I don't have an answer on that at this point, but I'm thinking that the quarantine will come to the team affected.
And one would think that different of the phases that you're talking about for the library might be allowed in different phases of the governor's proposal. For instance, there would be different risk if the library wasn't going to be open to the public versus if they were going to be open to the public. Does the regional approach, he keeps mentioning the regional approach, might that provide any flexibility for our libraries? That it might be a regional decision?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we can only make decisions, for members of Upper Hudson. And I think, that's as far as that really goes. I don't know if that's, I don't know what you mean exactly.
Well, I think he was saying that like the Kettle District region could make more individualized decisions in what's allowed to open, evaluating the risk and the essentialness. So
you have to remember, our decision to reopen is an individual decision.
Well, not if the governor doesn't, not if it isn't allowed by the phase that the governor's proposed.
Yeah, as long as the governor says, okay, you can reopen, this is phase 2, and that's still a decision that's up to each individual library.
One would think, though, that, for instance, the library being closed to the public, but still being open in terms of services might be allowed sooner than being publicly open. So, for instance, maybe phase 2, still not open to the public, but providing services not from home might be possible for libraries. And then later, phase 3 for being open to the public. I don't mean to, it just is curious to me that one couldn't have different aspects open in relation to different phases of the state openings. So we can move on from here. Any other any other questions?
Just out of curiosity, does everyone get email from Nyla? You know, the updates from Nyla?
It doesn't seem like it.
Okay.
I do.
You
Yeah, I
know.
do.
Oh, okay.
Well, you would, Paul. But I meant for other board members,
No.
they had sent out a message about the phasing and where Nyla's negotiating with the governor's office.
It's like 3
They
days
sent
ago.
out at,
Yeah.
like well, they sent out one at 2:33 today.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Well, you know what? Maybe when we're off of this, I'll go back and I'll forward it to the rest of everybody.
Yeah, I think it might be good for everybody. All you'd have to do is go to the website and, get on the list, because we're also facing a financial issue, and that there's an advocacy email that came out today to contact your representatives in the state legislature. Basically, so libraries don't get forgotten in the legislature when they're redoing the budget, which there's 3 different times throughout the year that they can do that. And it's very easy to get lost in that shuffle. So, that's an advocacy email. I can forward that to everybody, but it's easy enough to get on their list too.
And I just forwarded the one that they sent out at 2:33. They're also talking about, I think, the congressional advocacy too. It never ends.
I can see, I just went to their website because I'm not getting the emails, and I see under advocacy, becoming an advocate, like sign up for Nyla's Library Advocacy Center. Is that where the emails are coming from?
Yeah, right.
If that's it, I'll sign up for it through there. I'm just making sure that that's where I should be going to sign up, because there's not like anything on the homepage that says sign up for.
Okay.
My messages come from Nyla's marketing@nyla.org. And it could be because I go to the conferences, so they have my email from that. I don't know. I mean, we are all members of Nyla through the library.
Yeah.
So I would have thought that I always guess that they send it to pretty much all the trustees, but maybe not. I don't know.
Nope. All right. Well, I'll figure it out.
Okay, anything more on this topic? The next agenda item is continued support for staff.
Yeah, I put that on the agenda, but we had said, and I don't, we didn't formally do anything before, but we had said that we were continuing to pay staff through the last payroll before this meeting. And I think maybe we need to sort of address that again going forward.
Did you have a recommendation?
Yes, currently I recommend continuing to pay the staff. They are, of course, continuing to work as best we can and provide service as much as we can. But also in terms of reopening, and I think I'm hopeful that we're reasonably close to that. We need a good trained staff in order to reopen. So we would rather not lose any staff members at this point. And so I do recommend continuing to pay all staff.
Evelyn, did you start to say something?
Yes, so if we're going to have a discussion, and this is a point of order, and first I have to start with a question. And since no one brought this up the last couple of times we've talked about it, I guess I love being the villain of the piece. Sorry, Kirsten. Is Isabel still a member of staff? Paul?
What's that?
Is Isabel still a member of staff?
No.
Okay, then it is a moot point. I was thinking about, the issue of recusals. So,
And I'm sorry, I didn't know the answer to the question because we don't talk about it. So we've had to maintain a strict separation on that. So I wasn't sure. So Paul, thank you for letting me know.
that's why I directed it at Paul in particular, not at you. But so I needed to ask that question because, that kind of point of order and how we're doing things. It was like, uh-oh.
So I can unrecuse myself now for these discussions.
Well, according to Paul, she's not a member of staff, so you don't have to recuse anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
And Paul, did you have a recommendation for how long we should extend the approval?
Well,
Forever.
can I predict the future? No, not really. I think certainly we should look at this maybe in each board meeting, so extend it through until the next board meeting.
Actually, I think we extended this one until the end of the month following the board meeting to give us time to be able to, react. So if we're going to do, I think it was through the end of May, so we should do it through the end of June.
Yeah.
Correct.
Thanks, Mark.
We are very lucky to have the staff we do have,
We are.
We are incredibly lucky to have them. And
We are.
losing anyone, not just because they're valued employees, but because of the people that they are, I think is just something I don't even want to think about, to be honest.
Do we need to vote on this?
Yes.
Can I make a motion that we pay the staff through the end of June?
Yes, you may. May I second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Could we have a slow roll on this? So Kirsten,
Yes, aye.
Bob,
Yes.
not
Michelle, yes.
Michelle,
Yes. Aye.
Evelyn,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Marie?
I abstain. So the motion carries. Okay, next. Addition to the code of conduct.
Yes, it was brought to my attention that maybe we need to spell this out in our code of conduct, which we do post. And I have to apologize. I didn't write this out so that I could put it in the Dropbox. But if I can read this, maybe we can approve this as an addition. The code of conduct was approved by the board in 2014. So it is a document, an official document of the library and an official policy. So I figured the amendment should probably be approved again by the board. What I have is if circumstances warrant, such as the prevalence of a highly contagious disease, visitors to the library will be required to wear face masks which cover both the mouth and nose and practice social distancing.
I open my mouth, I say nothing when I'm on mute. That was the thing I was going to say after I read through this, that was missing. I think we need to be a little bit more definitive of what we mean by social distancing.
In other words, add
6 feet.
stay at least 6 feet apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about saying as in compliance with New York State Department of Health guidelines or something like that?
Yeah.
which also would help cover, what constitutes a health crisis, or I don't think it's for us to decide what is an event that would trigger this here. I think you want to go to a state agency guideline for.
Mhm.
So Paul, can you work on that and then bring it back next month?
I can.
I don't think we'll need it before then, right?
I don't think so. I was hopeful, but
Singing.
what if we do?
I can't imagine that we would. I mean, we are not even, Rensselaer County's hasn't even met all the metrics to go to phase one, and we're certainly not phase one.
They said today that we made advancement just today, and we now qualify under 5 of the 7 requirements.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think we're getting there, but I mean, the first thing we'll hit is phase one. And we're not, at best, we're phase 2. We're, so I think my hunch is that we'll have time to be able to look at this again in the next meeting.
I shall bring it back in June.
And if there's any changes in the timetable, we can always do a special meeting or.
Right. It's not like any of us are going anywhere.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
This is, we can set one of these up really quick.
Yeah, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. The question is, if so many places are requiring it, period, because it is part of the New York State guidelines anyways. Like Price Jobber has a sign, the drugstores have the signs up. We can have that same sign of, no mask, no service, period. And then worry about too, putting it officially in the code of conduct. That's a much more generalized thing, but right now, I think we can still do it without having to have it in there, if we're pressed.
Okay, thank you. Director's report?
Oh, boy. Okay. As soon as I can find that. Okay. I think you're all familiar now with the state reopening plan. It continues to be an issue that we're working on, and hopefully libraries will soon be mentioned as part of the state plan. I think the only other thing that I wanted to mention was the construction project, the masonry construction project is still moving forward. We had to stop and do the hazmat testing, which has been done now. I don't have the report, but as soon as we have the report, I think we'll bid these 2 masonry jobs. I'm still concerned about going forward because, as you know, we've put all of our reserve funds into the construction account to use as matching funds. So, there's questions about whether any of that will be needed going forward. As you know, the cities and counties face essentially a worse scenario because of the lack of sales tax, which doesn't directly affect us. But there are other considerations and there are other budget issues that we'll need to explore going forward. I also, and I didn't put this exactly in my report, but I also wanted to mention next year's budget. The 2021 budget is something that needs to be thought about at this point. There's really going to be three choices in next year's budget. The first choice is to not put it on the ballot at all, which means that our 2021 budget reverts to the 2020 level. And the tax levy is the same as it is this year. The second approach would be to comply exactly with the tax cap, which is not exactly 2%. It's actually a figure based on a couple of the factors, and usually comes out less than 2%. It's heavily based on the cost of living index. So it might come out as 1.5, 1 3/4, something like that, as a percentage increase. And that would go on the ballot. That would have to be voted on. The third choice is to put on the ballot what we need, which might be 5 or 6%. So it's something to think about going forward. Right now, let me tell you up front, I'm leaning towards not putting it on the ballot at all in 2021.
Any particular reason, Paul?
I think based on environment and so on that we're in, people's concerns, the enormous unemployment levels, you know, is certainly going to cloud the issue when we get to voting on something like this. I think at this point, it might be a good idea to keep a low profile.
Because if you do put it on the ballot with the 2% or whatever that level would be, the worst that can happen is it could be rejected, and we would still get the same as we would get if it didn't. And in all likelihood, even if we're at the same level, our revenues will be less due to people not being able to pay their taxes. So even if we stay at the same amount, we may end up with smaller tax revenues. But I mean, we can discuss, you know, we can certainly discuss this more.
Yeah, I think that I'm just introducing it as food for thought at this point.
This is just a thought that's occurring to me now, so I'm going to divest myself of the thought that that word optics, I know, Mark, I love that word. By not putting it on a ballot, do we not look like we're not being transparent or trying to work with the public about it? I mean, bottom line is that we revert, if we need to, then revert back to what it was last year. Then at least we've gone through the process of it. And again, I don't know which way I stand yet, but it's just that first reaction I'm having that maybe we could then be accused of, oh, they're not sharing anything with us, which is a thread that you can hear out there in the community sometimes. You know, again, that transparency, the idea of trying to communicate with the public that we might want to. It's just another, it's the other thought of why we might want to put it on the ballot.
Yeah, there's, you know, from an optical standpoint, if we decide not to put it on the ballot, we should be very proactive about communicating why we're not putting it on the ballot. And we could be clearly communicating to the community that we've made the decision that while the costs of running the library continue to rise over time, considering the financial situation we're on, we've decided to stay with the budget that we already have. And that's a different way of looking at the same thing by getting out in the front of it.
I think we have to also think about So the library, our elections are in September, correct?
Yes.
We need to think about how that's going to work. I mean, I know there's concern. I know it's a small election in a year with a lot of big elections, but there's a lot of concern about people voting in person and how even though our process is different, there's still a certain level of interaction. So I think it wouldn't hurt to think through if there's any way we can make it if there's any way we can make it better for the public and change any of our processes,
I would agree.
And we might be able to, do it in a way that we can encourage more people to participate.
It's possible.
Yeah.
So for further discussion, maybe include some of this along with the other items that we'll be discussing at the special finance committee meeting as a starting point in talking about it. Unfortunately, we won't know what the rate or the amount of our tax revenues that we're supposed to get that we'll actually get until right before the election. So observations and community feedback is next. Evelyn, I don't know if you heard, Monica expressed appreciation for informing her about Hoopla because it gave her something more to make her life better at this time. So that's all I have. Anybody else have any community feedback? Okay. Old business, new business? Anyone?
New business. And it's in a way, it has come up that we need to start thinking about that election, not just the budget, but the seats and the requests for candidates. There are 2 seats up this year. So that process, we usually start at least thinking and talking about it and how we're going to advertise the process. So that's a whole new other discussion, and we'll have to have it at some point soon.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, public comment. Joy?
I'm here.
Is the public unmuted in case they want to speak?
They can unmute themselves whenever they want. They have control.
Does anyone have any public comment?
There is one other thing. It's a request. I don't know if I'm speaking for anybody else, but as we start moving forward, I know I would particularly appreciate a report, Paul, from you, something that is as detailed as possible about where we stand, what we're going, how we're dealing with those phases. I hear things from Upper Hudson. I know we've gotten a couple quick pieces, I know from Marie, but I would actually either prefer or appreciate something from you, Paul, that kind of kept at least me, if no one else is interested, and I hope it would go to the whole board, informed about what's going on and how we're going to get through this. And by the way, thank you for putting the board in the plan of action too. I appreciated seeing that in there.
Do I have to report the bad news?
Yes, yes, please. Come on. It's the entire package. It's the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, that's what it'll be.
Otherwise, we can't make decisions. It's what did someone say? It isn't all like fairy dust. Is that possible? Paul, is that possible?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else? Do we need to vote to adjourn?
What's the date? June? What's our next meeting? June.
9th?
My birthday.
My birthday's this Thursday. I'm having a wild party with tons of people involved.
Birthday Thursday?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I'm actually gonna have a Zoom birthday party, but I decided that I can only invite like 6 or 7 people, so it's really like it really is forcing me to evaluate my friends on who I really want to spend time with on my birthday.
Well,
So I may end up not having any friends after this.
if we were all together, I'd bring a cake or cupcakes, but we're not. Oh well.
Next year.
Next year probably won't be on a Tuesday
No, it won't.
or the second Tuesday.
Okay. I mean, if people want to continue to socialize, let's stop the recording. And you're welcome to do, do that.
Okay, stopping the recording.
Thanks, Joy.
You're welcome.